Hello, welcome to part 3, thanks for staying with me. In the last part we looked at the titles. In this part our heroes arrive and we're going to look at how to draw the viewer's attention to something you want to show them. We're going to look at some set building and we're also going to create the flaming torches and have them interact with our physical set. Usually you might start a scene with an establishing shot to let the viewer know where they are. But I decided to go for a black screen and then fade to a close-up of the door, so the viewer has as much information about the room as the people on the other side of the door.
Come on.
The lockpick sound effect is me rattling a screwdriver against a metal stapler,
Pick this lock.
and the dialogue is supposed to be a small clue that this is a game, but perhaps it's too subtle.
That was my last one.
Because the people are on the other side of the door, I've muffled the voices by putting them through a low-pass filter using a brilliant piece of free software called Audacity, which I use for all of my audio recordings. Now, I do have a problem with this scene. While the sound effects and the dialogue make it clear what's happening, I could have given the viewer a visual clue as well. So I'm counting that as another sin towards the running total for the series. Maybe something like this where I do a zoom or a push in towards the keyhole and move it onto the intersecting thirds line, or maybe even start it from the intersecting thirds line and move it more centrally with that same push in like this. So why is this so important? Well, while you know what's going on in the scene, it might not always be obvious to the viewer. You need to find a way to lead the viewer through the scene and encourage them or even force them to focus on the things that you want to show them. And there's a number of methods you can use to do this. Let's take a look at just a few of them. So I mentioned about getting the keyhole on the intersecting third. And that comes from something called the rule of thirds. Now the theory is that if you don't have something placed centrally on the screen, then the most pleasing composition would be to have them placed on one of these thirds lines. The theory goes on to say that naturally our eyes are drawn to where these lines would intersect on the screen. So if you have something important that you want them to notice, it's best to put them where the lines intersect. Now in my image I have the barbarian in the foreground and his head is in the bottom right intersection point. And then I have Zarkon and his head is on the upper left intersection point. Now normally I try to get the eye level to fit on that top line, on that upper third line. I've missed it just by a little bit here, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference. So I'm not giving myself a sin. If you think I deserve one, let me know in the comments. So that's the rule of thirds. Let's look at some other methods that are probably more obvious to draw someone's attention to something. So we've already seen the zoom push or the push in when we looked at the keyhole. Now you can vary the speed at which you push in to an object. You might take a long, slow push in and perhaps add an ominous sound effect to it to say there's something dodgy about this object. You might want to do a much quicker push in, maybe even a quick cut, where you just go from one shot to the zoomed in shot immediately. Add perhaps a dramatic sound effect, as if to say, there it is. That's the thing we need to be frightened of. The next one we're going to look at is a focus push or a rack focus. Here we have the figure in the background who's in focus, and we slowly change the focus to the object in the foreground to draw the viewer's attention towards it. And the last method we're going to cover is to use some form of camera movement. In this case, I've used a pan shot. Now that's a lot of theory to explain why I should have zoomed into a keyhole, but if you want to see it in action, I can't think of any better example than a scene from Mootroid X Productions' excellent The Last Colony Part 2. I'll put a link to it in the description and I'll add a card. While you're looking at it, just notice how he leads the viewer through the scene and uses the techniques we've just discussed to help the viewer focus on objects that he wants them to focus on. So before our heroes burst in on us, just a quick word about the set. I've been following the work of YouTubers like Patrick Ohm and Factoria Tabletop, and it's encouraged me to make more of my own sets and props. It does take a little bit more time, but I find it fun. It can be cheap, and you can make exactly what you want. The stone wall is made with a small screwdriver and a ruler, and score in the brick pattern and some extra scratches onto foam board. I then rolled up some aluminium foil into a tight ball and pressed it onto the bricks to get some indentations to give them a little bit more texture. And finally, you can either paint it, but here I've used alcohol markers and some black wash. The door took a ridiculously long time to make. It's ice lolly sticks scratched with a sharp point to give them more texture, then stuck together and painted. The handle is made by wrapping a piece of wire around a pen, which is a good way to make a circle, and then that's painted as well. And the torch holders are for candles that you might put on a birthday cake. So speaking of torches, they're obviously a virtual effect, a visual effect. So let's see how I made them and how they could be made to interact with the physical set. So here we are again back in HitFilm Express 13, the free version of HitFilm. We did do a brief tour of all the panels and the workspace in the last video, so I won't bore you with that again. One thing I have changed over here on the right hand side, I did have an audio meter which I later found was empty, so I've replaced it with the meters panel, which will do the same job for what we're looking for here. So I've created a composite shot, I've called it Torches, and I've dragged in this background scene, and now we're going to put some torches on top of it. So I shall search for the bonfire effect, and then I will drag that to the top of our timeline. And as you see, we've already got something that looks as if it will do the job for our torches. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the transform properties, and I'm just going to drag it along and position it roughly where I want it to be on top of this torch holder. Now it's a little bit wide and it's not very high, so if I change the scale here, notice it changes everything at once. So I want it thinner, but I also want it higher or taller. So I'll click this link button, so now all the scale buttons will operate independently of each other. So I'll make it a little bit skinnier and I'll make it just a little bit taller. So there we have our torch in position. Sometimes I think this might look better if we put a blur on it. There's the blur, put it on. Maybe it's perhaps a little bit of preference, but let's stick with it like this for now. I'll remove that blur. So as a torch it looks good, but what we're looking to do is we're looking to make it seem as if it's part of our surroundings. So for that it has to interact. Now this doesn't have to be Hollywood level. All I'm going to do here is make it look as if it's impacting that wall behind it. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to create a plane layer, and I'm going to make it this orange color. And this is going to fill the screen because it's at the top of the stack. So I will drag it below the bonfire, because what we want it to be is between the torch and that back wall. So now it's a bit difficult to see anything, so I shall go to transform, reduce the opacity or the see-throughness just a bit so we can see what we're doing. Now I'd probably spend a bit more time doing this in reality, but for now I'm going to take this mask tool. Now a mask will either cut a piece out of an object or it will cut a hole into an object. So what we're doing here is we're going to drag around, let's say like that, And as I say again, this is being done very roughly. And what we've done is we've cut a piece of that orange plane out. Now if I increase the opacity again, we have just got an orange disc. It looks nothing like reflected torchlight. So first thing I'll do is I'll take the opacity back down again. And what we need to do is get rid of this hard edge that's been created by the plane, by the mask. So if I open up the mask, go to shape, we have a feather strength. Now this is how blurry or how feathery the edges of the mask are. And if I turn that up, you can see that that orange plane is now merging into the wall, blurring into the wall. So if I click away from it, that looks as if it's part of the scene to me. Now when I play it, we'll see that it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. And what I want it to do is flicker as if it's the reflection of the torchlight. So I search for the flicker effect. It's an add-on. If you remember what happens when we take an add-on, I will put that onto the plane and we get our watermark added because it's an add-on effect. But now when we play it, it flickers that background plane. Now just for completeness, I will duplicate, and for the plane I will press Ctrl D to duplicate just to make it a bit quicker. And then I'm going to take this this torch and I'm just going to take it along and position it over the top of this one. I'm going to do the same thing for the plane. I'm going to transform, I'm going to take it across and just put it roughly behind it. Now at the moment, because they're duplicates of each other, the flicker will happen at exactly the same time. So if I go into the flicker effect, we have a seed parameter or variable, and I'm just going to change the seed so that when we play it, we have two torches, two reflected backgrounds flickering at different times. The very last thing I want to do here is add a sound effect for the torches. So I drag in the sound effect file. Now if we keep an eye on the meters over here, when I play this, you will notice that that sound effect goes up between -18 and -12. Now I will admit that sound is a bit of a mystery to me, but I try and record my dialogue so that it hits this -12 line. If I want something to have a bit of a bang, I might let that sound effect go to -6. If I'm adding music, I probably get it somewhere between -18 and -24. And for ambient sounds, it's probably more between 24 and 30. So if we see that torch is hitting up, let's say at -12, and I don't even know if this is the right way of doing it, so I'm going to go to the audio of the torch's WAV, and I'm going to take another 12 off that, so it should now fit somewhere around -24 to -30. And there you go. And that way our sound effect, which in this case is an ambient sound, a background sound, isn't going to drown out our dialogue. And there we have our torches integrated with the physical set. So that's it for this part. In the next part, we're going to share some green screening tips to get a better result. We're going to remove that green background using HitFilm, and we're also going to make some shiny things a little shinier. Thanks for watching.